The studio was glowing. America was watching. The high-profile international broadcast, Voices of the World, had pulled record viewership tonight. Politicians, journalists, veterans, and thinkers had filled the dazzling set. But there were two names everyone tuned in for: Karoline Leavitt, rising U.S. Congresswoman, and Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader from Burkina Faso. It wasn't supposed to get ugly, but it did. The moderator had just asked a question about global partnerships in Africa. Karoline leaned forward, her smile too wide, her eyes too sharp. She chuckled. "Why are we even pretending?" she said. "Captain Traoré, your so-called anti-imperialism isn't leadership. It's toxic pride. You're biting the hand that feeds you." Traoré didn't flinch. The air thickened. Then, without warning, Karoline leaned closer to her mic and spat the words that would freeze millions in their seats. "You know what? Go back to Africa, you ingrate." Time stopped. Mouths dropped. The moderator stared, speechless. A child watching from home dropped his cereal. The camera zoomed in. All eyes turned to Traoré. But he didn't yell. He didn't blink. He just slowly leaned in and quietly said, "Let me tell you a story." You could hear a pin drop. Even the camera crew froze. Karoline looked smug, as if she'd finally cornered him. Social media was already exploding. But Ibrahim Traoré? His face stayed calm, unreadable, like a man who had seen war and survived. Then he began to speak. "In 1987, he said softly, Burkina Faso lost a man named Thomas Sankara. He dreamed of a free Africa, proud and strong. He was killed for that dream." Karoline rolled her eyes, but Ibrahim's voice carried through the room like a prayer. "My father worked in the gold mines. He came home one night covered in blood, not from injury but from saving a foreign worker who'd collapsed in the heat. He wasn't thanked. He was fired." The screen split, the studio on one side, homes across America on the other, people staring, unmoving. "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to remind you. Africa never asked to be enslaved. We never invited colonizers, but we survived, with dignity." The silence that followed was heavier than steel. Even Karoline looked unsettled now, and Traoré still hadn't raised his voice. "Now ask yourself," he said slowly, "who really needs to go back?" In a small apartment in Detroit, an 11-year-old black boy named Malik sat cross-legged in front of his TV. He watched the live debate with wide, unblinking eyes. And then, tears came. Not because of what Karoline had said, though that hurt, but because of what Ibrahim had said after. "Africa never asked to be enslaved, but we survived, with dignity." Malik's mother, a nurse working double shifts, had always told him stories about where they came from, but he'd never seen someone say it like that, on TV, to the world, and not flinch. He turned to his mother. "Mama, he's like Grandpa." She smiled, wiping her cheek. In the studio, Karoline was shifting uncomfortably in her seat. The host, trying to save the moment, asked, "Captain Traoré, are you saying America has no right to criticize?" Traoré's answer wasn't loud, but it was unforgettable. "No," he said. "I'm saying you should look in the mirror before speaking into a microphone." Boom. Viewers across the country leaned in. Even those who had never heard his name started Googling Ibrahim Traoré. "And Malik?" he whispered. "That's my hero." He wasn't alone. The tide had just turned. The camera stayed on Ibrahim Traoré's face. He didn't move. He didn't blink. But thousands watching from across the world could feel it. Something was shifting. In a quiet corner of Ouagadougou, Traoré's mother sat watching the broadcast on a small TV. Her hands trembled. She remembered the years he walked barefoot to school, the nights she fed him water and cassava, because they had no rice. And now, here he was, across the world, being told he was ungrateful. Her tears fell before she even realized they had started. Back in the studio, Karoline Leavitt leaned back, folding her arms as if she'd won. But Traoré finally looked up. His voice was low, soft, almost like he was speaking to someone else far away. If gratitude means silence, then I'm sorry. I cannot be silent. The room felt colder, the lights brighter. The host cleared his throat, but no one dared interrupt. Because now the world wasn't watching a debate. They were watching a reckoning. And for some, it was already too much to hold back their tears. Karoline tried to cut in, but Traoré raised a hand. Calm, controlled. You called me an ingrate, he said, but let me explain why I speak. He looked into the camera. His name was Adama, my best friend. We were both 12. Millions leaned forward. One day, a mining truck owned by a foreign company hit him while he was carrying water. They said it was an accident. They didn't stop. They didn't pay. They just left. Traoré's voice cracked, barely. My mother buried him in a cotton bag. We had no coffin, just prayers. The studio was dead silent. Karoline's face hardened, unsure whether to look defiant or ashamed. Traoré continued. So when I speak, I don't do it out of hate. I do it for the children buried with no name, for the farmers who never saw justice, for my brother, Adama. Viewers across America began sobbing. One mother in Georgia paused her cooking and cried over her sink. A soldier in North Carolina wiped his eyes. Even some in Congress were texting, "Did you see this?" The man Karoline called ungrateful was now reminding the world what true pain sounded like. A technician in the control room whispered, "Don't cut to break." Everyone knew something rare was unfolding. Traoré looked down, then raised his eyes again. They weren't angry, just tired, deep. My first uniform was not given to me by the army, he said. It was stitched by my mother, out of old fabric. I wore it to protect my village from gangs who stole food at night. Karoline stayed silent. Even she felt the shift now. One day, he said, an American officer visited. He laughed at our training. He said, "You people play soldier with sticks." The studio winced. That night, I stood alone on a hill watching my village sleep. I prayed, not for weapons, but for respect. His eyes met the camera. I don't hate America, but I will not kneel for it. Somewhere in Texas, a veteran stood from his chair and saluted the screen. A young African-American girl watching from her classroom whispered, "He sounds like my dad." And in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim's mother pressed her hand to the TV screen. She whispered, "My son." God was watching. And the world? It had just stopped to listen. As the debate camera zoomed in, social media exploded. Clips of Ibrahim Traoré's words flooded TikTok and Instagram. But while the world watched in shock, one man in New Jersey sat still, shaking. His name was Sergeant Louis Harrington. He had served in Burkina Faso once, on a mission Traoré's battalion had protected from rebels. Louis had always remembered one thing, that African captain with no boots. He remembered how young Traoré looked, how he gave his last bottle of water to an injured boy, how his uniform was torn. He had nothing, Louis whispered, but he walked like a king. Now, seeing Traoré on TV, dignified and calm, even after being insulted, Louis broke down. He's still the same man. Back in the studio, Karoline Leavitt leaned forward and asked, voice dripping with false grace, "So what do you want, Captain? A medal?" Traoré didn't blink. He leaned in and said, "No, madam, I want my people to eat." The audience gasped. The internet lit up. And for the first time since the show began, Karoline had no words. In a dusty village in Burkina Faso, a young girl named Aminata sat watching the live stream on a neighbor's phone. She hadn't eaten that night, again, but her eyes were glowing. "Mama, that's our captain." Her mother nodded. "He was once like you, small, hungry, full of fire." In the studio, Ibrahim Traoré slowly removed a small folded photo from his pocket. The camera zoomed in. It was a faded picture. A little boy kneeling next to a goat, barefoot, smiling wide. "This is me. I was 7. Karoline snorted. "So?" Traoré's reply cut deeper than steel. "I am not ashamed of where I come from. I am ashamed only that children still go hungry while your corporations steal our gold." A producer backstage dropped his headset. The sound guy whispered, "Did he just say that?" But it was true. Somewhere in Houston, a young African-American girl named Nia watched and whispered, "He's fighting for us too." Aminata in Burkina Faso was still awake. She smiled through tears. That night she went to bed without food, but with something stronger than dinner. Hope. The makeup under Karoline Leavitt's eyes was starting to break. She'd expected an argument, a clash, a soundbite she could control. But Ibrahim wasn't shouting. He was exposing truth, gently, precisely, painfully. "You say I should be grateful," he said. "But tell me, would you be grateful if someone built a hospital, then charged you your life to enter it?" Karoline opened her mouth, then closed it again. The host looked panicked. The control room scrambled. Cut to commercial, show a graphic. But no one dared interrupt. Because this wasn't politics anymore. This was confession. Viewers cried. In Atlanta, a black pastor turned to his son and whispered, "That's how a man speaks." In Los Angeles, a white mother texted her friend, "Why is this making me cry?" Back in the studio, Traoré leaned in with one final blow. "I don't need permission to exist, and I will not apologize for surviving." Karoline blinked fast. Her smile cracked. For the first time that night, she looked small. And America? America had just seen a man lead without lifting a fist. Captain Ibrahim Traoré paused again. He reached into his jacket. The audience watched, breath held. He unfolded an old, weathered letter. The corners torn, the ink faded. He held it gently, like something sacred. "This is a letter I wrote when I was 15, he said. "To the president of Burkina Faso. I never sent it. I didn't think anyone would care." Karoline squinted, unsure what to make of it. "I wrote, 'Dear President, please tell the world we are not weak. We just don't have shoes. We are not poor. We just don't get paid. We are not angry. We are tired.'" A camera caught a tear running down a woman's cheek in the front row. "I wanted the world to know we existed, that we mattered." He folded it again, slowly, and placed it back in his jacket. "I don't need applause," he said quietly. "Just ears that truly listen." Somewhere in New York, a school teacher paused the video and wept. A child in Burkina Faso pointed at the screen and whispered, "That's how I feel." That letter may never have reached the president, but tonight, it had finally reached the world. Karoline was growing agitated, her voice cracked with forced control. "You act like you're the only one who suffered. My grandfather came here with nothing too." Traoré didn't flinch, but then he surprised her. "Tell me his name." Karoline blinked. "What?" "Your grandfather. Tell me his name." The camera zoomed in. Karoline stumbled. "Well, I mean, it's not about that." Traoré stayed silent. The audience watched, riveted. "I know mine," he said. "Adama. He died carrying water for a gold mine he would never profit from." Karoline looked down. Her fingers slowly reached into her purse. pulling out a worn photo she always kept hidden. His name was Elias. Traoré nodded. Then we are not so different. Silence. But the difference is, I would never tell you to go back to where you came from. The words struck like thunder. For the first time, Karoline looked human. Somewhere in Mississippi, a retired teacher whispered, "He didn't just break her, he healed her." The world watched in awe. This was no longer a debate. It was a mirror, held up to all of us. Traoré reached into his pocket again. This time it wasn't a letter. It was a pair of tiny sandals, worn, frayed, the straps torn halfway. He held them up. The studio gasped. "These," he said, "belonged to my little cousin. Her name was Miriam. She was 6. Karoline froze. One day, while walking to school, she stepped on a broken medicine bottle outside a foreign clinic. She bled for 2 hours. We had no car, no doctor. We buried her in the same shoes." He closed his fist. "So when I speak of injustice, I don't speak in theory." In the audience, a grown man cried into his palms. A group of school children in Ghana watching via live stream fell silent. "We are not angry because we hate the West," Traoré said. "We are angry because you don't see what you leave behind." Karoline sat still. For once, she had no defense. Traoré placed the sandals gently on the table, and as the studio lights reflected in his eyes, the whole world finally saw it. This wasn't a soldier. This was a story that had survived fire and walked barefoot through the ashes. While the debate streamed live, a young black journalist named Malik in Washington was glued to his laptop. He wasn't just watching. He was digging. Karoline Leavitt had spoken with such venom, as if Traoré's voice had no place on American soil. But something about her tone felt familiar. So Malik searched. He scanned public records, speeches, university clips. And then, he found it. A speech Karoline gave 5 years earlier. She was in college, bright-eyed, passionate. And in the middle of her talk, she said something stunning. "Africa deserves dignity. The West has failed to listen. We must do better." Malik sat back, stunned. What happened to her? Meanwhile, in the studio, Karoline watched Traoré with silent eyes. She was no longer angry. She was remembering. A memory flickered in her mind of an exchange student from Mali. His name was Jibril. He'd sat beside her in a world politics class. He'd cried after presenting about child labor in West African gold mines. Karoline had hugged him. So what had changed? That night, a message showed up in her inbox from Jibril, and all it said was, "Are you proud of who you've become?" Karoline didn't answer immediately. The studio light still burned. Traoré sat calmly, but behind his eyes was more than pain. There was purpose. The moderator leaned forward, trying to shift tone. "Captain Traoré, what do you hope America understands tonight?" He breathed in deeply, then spoke the quietest words of the night. "We are not asking you to save us. We are asking you to stop standing on our necks." The whisper echoed louder than any scream. Across the world, people gasped. In Kenya, a student paused her studies. In Ohio, a teacher recorded the screen to show her class. Even the moderator was stunned. "Would you say that again?" Traoré looked straight into the camera. "You cannot keep lecturing us while sitting on the gold taken from our lands." Karoline looked down at the tiny sandals on the table. They hadn't moved, but something in her chest had. For the first time in the broadcast, she whispered, barely audible, "I used to know better." But no one heard, except Ibrahim. He turned to her gently and nodded. It was subtle, but it happened. Karoline Leavitt's fingers, once confidently pointed in accusation, were now shaking as they pressed against her lips. She didn't cry, not fully. but her eyes turned glassy. "You've opened wounds I forgot I had," she whispered. "I didn't come here to be taught. But you reminded me of something I buried." Traoré didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply nodded. "We don't win with anger. We win with truth." And then, something happened that no one expected. Karoline reached into her purse and pulled out a bracelet, made of thin, woven straw. "He gave me this," she said. "Jibril." She looked down. He said, "This is from my village, so you'll remember we're real." The studio was frozen. She held up the bracelet and whispered, "I forgot, but now I remember." Across the country, emotions burst. Thousands wept. Forgiveness was visible on screen. Even in silence, Traoré was leading, not just his country, but the hearts of strangers across oceans. And suddenly, this wasn't just a political moment. It was a healing. The show was supposed to end 30 minutes ago, but no one moved. Not the host, not the camera crew, not even the audience. The studio was quiet, but something historic had happened, and everyone knew it. Karoline Leavitt, once full of fire and pride, now sat silent, holding a bracelet from her college days, and a truth she could no longer outrun. Ibrahim Traoré glanced at her, then turned back to the camera. "I don't speak to make enemies. I speak to make sure no child ever has to choose between silence or starving." Back in Africa, the streets were flooded, not with anger, but with joy. In Burkina Faso, families huddled around old TVs. Some clapped, some cried. And across the United States, something unimaginable happened. People from all sides started sharing the clip. Even those who once mocked his name now whispered, "That man changed something tonight." A trending hashtag was born, the Traoré moment. And for the first time in years, it wasn't a celebrity, a scandal, or a war that united millions. It was a man who never raised his voice, but raised the world's conscience. 3 days after the debate, Karoline Leavitt sat alone in her congressional office. No cameras, no applause, just her. A cold cup of coffee, and an inbox full of messages. Some were hate, some were praise, but one stopped her cold. Subject, "From Jibril." Her hands trembled as she clicked it open. "I watched," it said. "I cried. But I forgave you the moment I saw your eyes. You remembered. That's all that matters." Attached was a photo. Young Karoline and Jibril sitting on the campus lawn, laughing, studying. She wore the same bracelet. Tears dropped on her keyboard. That night, Karoline posted a video. No studio, no makeup, just her voice. "Captain Traoré taught me something no debate ever could. I'm sorry. To him, to Africa, and to my younger self." It went viral in hours, and at the end she said, "I'm not here to save the world, but I'm here to listen now." People didn't cheer, they cried, because when true change happens, it feels quiet, but deep, like healing. And somewhere across the ocean, a barefoot child smiled. 7 days later, Captain Ibrahim Traoré returned to Burkina Faso. But something had changed. He wasn't just their leader. He was a voice for the voiceless across continents. At the airport, a small girl ran up to him and handed him a letter. He opened it later, under a mango tree where he used to play as a boy. It read, "Thank you for speaking for my daddy. He worked in a mine. He died. But I saw you on TV. I'm not afraid anymore." He folded the letter, looked at the sky, and whispered, "That's why I spoke." That night, Traoré gave one final interview. When asked what message he had for the world, he said simply, "May we never forget the humanity in each other." His voice didn't shake, but everyone else's did. In living rooms, classrooms, and offices, people sobbed together. Because for once, truth wasn't shouted, it was felt and remembered. If this story touched your heart, even a little, I want you to do 3 things. Click that like button, not for me, but for every forgotten voice this story honored. Leave a comment below. Let me know how this made you feel. Tell me what part moved you the most, and subscribe, because on this channel, we tell stories that make people cry, think, and change. Let's never stop telling the truth with grace.